In a fit of anger, what was the worst decision you made and what were the consequences? Case 1. When I was 19, I worked at a summer camp as a sort of supervisor for a group of counselors. An event was coming up and I wanted to take a day off to attend. My boss insisted it wasn't possible, so I decided to call in sick because I was really upset. Knowing I'd need a doctor's note, I went to the doctor the next day. My regular doctor wasn't available and a nurse practitioner saw me. She did a thorough exam, pressed on my abdomen and asked if it hurt. I probably reacted in a couple of spots to pretend I was sick. She recommended I go to the emergency room because she thought I might have appendicitis. I figured that would mean a better medical note. At the ER, my whole family was there. They made me drink barium shakes to prepare for imaging to see if I needed an appendectomy. I had to drink 4 over the course of an hour. I was on the last one when the ER doctor came in and said he'd call the surgeon to discuss. Since I knew they'd take the images and everything would be fine, I wasn't worried. The surgeon came in after I finished the last drink, said he could see I was in some pain, I was still faking, and I explained we'd take images to confirm if it was real, expecting them to come back negative. Then he told me they didn't need the images and we should go to surgery right away. 10 years later, I'm still without an appendix and to this day I haven't told my family. Case 2. This didn't happen to me, but my dad used to have a serious alcohol problem. One night, when I was in high school, I was driving home from work in the small town where we lived. I ended up driving behind a truck that I was almost sure was my dad's. I should mention I had my high beams on because one of my headlights was faulty and wouldn't work otherwise. I was thinking how funny it was to end up behind my dad when suddenly he slowed down and stopped completely at a curve where I couldn't pass him. I was really confused. He got out of his vehicle and started yelling at me from his truck, calling me all sorts of names, and threw a Wendy's Frosty at my car. He threw it so hard it dented the center of my hood. I was absolutely terrified. He'd gotten angry like that before, and I had no idea what I'd done to set him off. He started walking toward my car, and even though he was at a distance, I could see the rage in his eyes. I was so shaken I couldn't even cry from fear. It turns out my dad had argued with a guy in the Wendy's parking lot who had a similar car, and with my high beams on, he couldn't tell it was me, plus he was probably drunk. When he got to my door, I guess he planned to pull the guy out of the car, but he froze, went back to his truck, and drove off. When I got home, he went to his room, grabbed a bag, and left for a hotel to start seeking help. He couldn't look at me or my mom in the eyes. Case 3, I punched a police officer in the nose and broke it. It was instinctive after a really terrible day, compounded by some creepy guy following me for 4 blocks. I thought it was the stalker, not the cop, when I felt a heavy hand on my shoulder. The officer was on the ground, upset, and his partner pointed a gun at me, yelling to put my hands up. I had to explain why the mistake happened. It turned out okay, but I had to go to the station to tell my story. It turned out the officer was about to ask if I'd noticed my wallet was about to fall out of my pocket. In the end, the officer with the broken nose said it was no big deal and let it slide if I bought him the burgers he was going to get. His smile was hilarious. Case 4. This didn't happen to me but to my brother, and I hope the entertaining story makes it valid. My brother is a rage addict, especially when playing first-person shooters on Xbox. He's thrown and destroyed about 5 or 6 Xbox 360 controllers. Those cost between $50 and $60 each, and he doesn't buy generic knockoffs. One night, at the peak of his rage, he was seconds away from smashing another controller. His hand was raised, ready to slam it into the floor. Suddenly, a lucid thought crossed his mind. Maybe I shouldn't do this, it'll cost me another $60 if I break this controller. But with his rage at full throttle and his hand already in the air, the only thing he managed to change was slamming it into the couch instead of the floor. Turns out, he'd left his new iPhone on the couch before starting the session and completely forgot until the moment the controller made contact and shattered it. That triggered a kind of super rage. I tried not to break my controller. How could this happen to me? With his fury unleashed, the logical course was to kick the 50-inch projection TV with all his might. He put his foot through the screen, decided to get blackout drunk, and woke up with the living room destroyed, a shattered iPhone, and the TV wrecked, covered in vomit. He vaguely recalls laughing while vomiting into the hole in the TV. The Xbox controller, though, was intact. Case 5. When my sister and I were much younger, we had our first fight, probably. She was just old enough to be trusted to move around the house on her own, and I'm about 5 years older. We fought, I don't remember why, but soon after, she came back to the room we'd been in. She was crying and holding a piece of paper. It was a drawing of her and me holding hands with the words, "I'm sorry." I tore it up in front of her, threw it on the floor, and left the room. I'm sure she doesn't remember it, but it still weighs on me to this day. Now we get along as well as two siblings can. I think if you asked her, she'd have no idea, but I'll never forget seeing her well up with tears right in front of me. Case 6. I didn't say goodbye to my mom the last time I saw her. In my head, I wished she wasn't alive just because I was so angry that she and my brother were going to Philly without me, and I had to go to work. I didn't realize it was because her radiation therapy hadn't worked, and she was basically going home to die. I had no idea it had progressed to that point, so when she came to hug me, I pulled away and she gave me a side hug. It was the best she could do, and she was so weak at that point. I still feel like the worst person in the world when I think about her face that morning and her frail little body pressed against me. Case 7. I don't remember exactly what the argument with my mom was about, but it was pretty intense. Insults flying back and forth. It got to the point where she tried to push me a few centimeters with a finger on my chest to close the kitchen door and end the argument. That's when I made probably the biggest, "Oh shit, why did I do that?" mistake of my life. I thought, to hell with it, I'm not done here, and when she tried to close the door, I pushed it hard to keep venting. From her reaction, I realized she felt genuinely intimidated, and it hit me what I was doing to my creator. I bolted to my room and stayed there until I heard the damn sound of the front door closing behind my dad when he got home from work. Defining moment. My dad came up to my room about 15 minutes later and said calmly, "You may be my son, but she's my wife. You don't want this to happen again, understand?" I nodded and he left. Those might not be intimidating words to others, but to me at that moment, I seriously thought I was done for. To this day, I look back and think it was a terrible move on my part. Case 8. Years ago, my ex-girlfriend and I had agreed to meet up after our respective parties. I got blackout drunk. I woke up alone the next morning. I tried calling and texting her, no response. After a while, I got angry and left furious voicemails. In the afternoon, she called and calmly told me how I showed up very drunk at her party, alternating between awkward declarations of love and humiliating her in front of her friends. I tried picking random fights with guys and flirting with girls. She helped me get home while I yelled at her and was cruel almost the whole way. When she dropped me off, I got mad because she wouldn't sleep with me. A total and absolute jerk. At that point, I was suffering the worst alcohol poisoning of my life and felt like the most insignificant person in the world for humiliating my girlfriend so stupidly. She said she might need a few days to think about it. In the end, she forgave me after a million apologies and flowers. I'd never felt so ashamed. Case 9. To motivate me to learn to tie my shoes, my mom offered to buy me a pack of Pokemon cards after the first time I did it on my own. When I succeeded, she congratulated me with a warm smile and so much affection as she did with everything, and we went straight to the neighborhood gas station to buy a pack. We weren't doing well financially, and she was the kind of person who could go days eating little so we wouldn't go without, and at our naive age, we didn't understand the sacrifices she made daily for us to live normally. She got me a couple of Digimon cards, and between tears and anger, I opened them and said they weren't the same, yelling even more because she hadn't gotten the right cards. She went back in and bought me Pokemon cards and gave them to me. It took years for me to understand why she cried on the way home even though I was happy. The Digimon cards were a few dollars cheaper and she was trying to save. I think about this almost every week, even after more than 15 years. I'll never understand what it was like for her to go through that, and now we're doing a bit better. More than anything, I want to apologize for my ignorance at such a young age and thank her for everything she's done. Truthfully, she probably doesn't remember it. That's why every now and then, I slip $10 bills into my mom's work pants, hoping they'll help and she can spend them on something she wants for once. I'm sorry, Mom. Case 10. My sister is quadriplegic and depended on my parents and siblings for almost every daily task when she was younger. Now she's extremely independent. One snowy day, school was canceled and we were excited because both parents had to work, so we'd have the house to ourselves with my sister as the babysitter. She's the oldest. She asked us to get her lunch. She'd barely eaten breakfast because Mom left in a rush. Being idiots, we chose to go play in the snow instead and teased her, saying she couldn't come with us. I don't know why that day brought out the worst in us. We were usually kind to her and only did activities she could join. We played in the snow for hours until the sun went down and Dad got home. By then, my sister hadn't eaten in 12 hours, which is very dangerous for her because of all the medication she takes. He scolded us worse than ever, detailing how it was for him the day she became paralyzed, how it still haunts him, and how he couldn't believe he'd raised 3 kids capable of being so cruel. It's one of the 2 times I've seen my dad cry, and it'll affect me forever. Case 11. My younger brother was a troubled teen to say the least, with a lot of anger issues. I've never been one for fighting, but he and my older brother were totally different. They saw violence as the only response to disagreements. One night, I was at my house with friends when I got a call from my mom. My younger brother and a friend were at her house tormenting her, both drunk. I went over. She lives a couple of streets away. By the time I got there, she called the police after my brother hit her and threw her down the stairs. She managed to get him out of the house, but he and his friend were trying to break down the door to get back in. My brother had a reputation with the local police, so they sent all the resources they could, 5 patrol cars and a K9 unit. My mom's street was lit up with blue and red lights when I arrived. My brother and his friend ran to the big park behind the house when they heard the sirens. The K9 team went after them while I comforted my mom. They found them hiding in a bush and took them to a patrol car in handcuffs. It was Friday night and my brother had to work all weekend, but I knew if they took him, he'd be held until at least Monday. I talked to the officer in charge, convinced him I could handle my brother when he was drunk, which was a lie, and begged to let me take him to my house instead of locking him up. My mom agreed through tears and they let me take him. We walked and at first there were no issues. As we got closer to my house, the drunken rambling started. He said he hated me, that everything was my fault, that he was ashamed to be my brother, etc. I decided I didn't want him at my house and reached into my pocket to call the officer. At that moment, I looked up and my brother threw a punch at me. I dodged it and hit him in the temple with my phone, which shattered. He nearly lost his balance and went down completely when I hit him again. That's when I lost control. All the anger for what he'd done to my mom, what he'd said to me, how he behaved, it all came out at once. I kicked him repeatedly with my Timberland boots, over and over. It wasn't until I pinned him to the ground that I saw his head roll back, his eyes glaze over, and a pool of red form under his head. I was sure he was dead. I couldn't call for help. I'd broken my phone. I couldn't shout for help. It was 2 a.m. and no one was around. I made the most terrifying decision of my life. I put my jacket under his head and left him there in the rain. I ran back to my house as fast as I could, burst through the door, yelled at my friends to call an ambulance, told them where my brother was and ran back to him. Luckily he was still there, unconscious but breathing. One of my friends arrived a minute later. We kept him warm until the ambulance arrived. The officer showed up at the same time. He said my brother probably wouldn't remember what happened because of how drunk he was and that he wouldn't include it in his final report. I rode in the ambulance to the hospital and sat for the next 8 hours waiting for him to regain consciousness. When he could have visitors, I went in ready to apologize. What happened left me stunned. He broke down crying immediately, apologized for always being an insufferable jerk, and begged me to forgive him. That's how my brother's troubled years ended. He couldn't work for a month, which was even more torturous because my mom, understandably, refused to talk to him or do anything for him. They didn't speak for about 18 months until he gave my mom her first grandchild. That brought the family together and changed him completely. We're closer than ever now. We may have come out stronger, but the feeling of thinking I'd killed my younger brother will always make that rage-fueled decision the worst of my life. Case 12. Once I got really mad at my older sister. I snuck up while she was using the computer and started rubbing a block of cheddar cheese on the top of her scalp, twisting it and pushing it against her silly head. By the time she reacted, I was already running upstairs 2 floors to lock myself in my room because I was sure she'd kill me. She was seconds behind me, but I managed to lock the door. She banged on it for a while, then everything went quiet. That's when I knew it was serious. She came back a couple of minutes later with an electric drill and started taking the lock apart. I pushed my dresser against the door. She eventually broke through while I, in desperation, kept barricading furniture, not unlike the students in Les Miserables. She finally got through and climbed the furniture barricade with a damn knife in her hand. The details of what happened next are blurry, but somehow, we're both still alive and friends today. Case 13. I physically attacked my girlfriend 10 years ago when I was 18. She said something that infuriated me and I slapped her. We were driving and I pulled over to the side of the road and told her I was so sorry and would never do it again. I started crying. I was sure she'd leave me. Most would say she was foolish for staying with me, but she's an incredibly intelligent woman. I ended up breaking up with her 5 months later, though I never physically harmed her or any other woman again. The consequences are that I have to live with the shame of having attacked a woman I loved and still love, when she didn't do anything aggressive toward me. She proved she was a true angel when she forgave me after what happened. The other consequence is that I'm willing to admit what I did so other young, naive guys don't make the same mistake. You don't often meet women as kind and loving as her. One who forgives a slap isn't there to manipulate or deceive you. She's there because she truly loves you. She probably hates me since I left her. I became an atheist, and those were the rules of Christianity. I couldn't be unequally yoked with her. I also hate myself a little for doing it. She was my first girlfriend, and it took me a few years to realize how incredibly unique and kind she was. Don't take anyone or anything for granted, and never make excuses for what you did wrong. Case 14. A kid at the mall tried to push me and I kept ignoring him. I told him to go away, but he kept coming at me. We were the same age, but he was short and very belligerent. One of those short guys who try to compensate by picking fights with bigger people. He ended up slapping me, and at that point I'd had enough. Just as I turned around, he reached into his pockets to pull out his phone, which I learned later, and I went fully defensive. I grabbed him by the neck, threw him to the ground, and in one swift move broke his arm in 2 or 3 places. I went to the hospital out of guilt, and the kid's mother started yelling at me, to which I calmly explained what her son had been doing. She ended up furious with him because it wasn't his first time. I talked to the kid and told him firmly to stop messing with people. He said, "You owe my family for the damages." I almost lost it right there. We live in Canada, and I don't know if that kid was a smartass or too dumb to understand that everything was covered by his mom's healthcare. I left and came back with $50 and apologized to his mom. There were no real consequences. Since we were in the mall, everything was recorded, and the police knew I acted in self-defense, though they gave me a warning for excessive force or some nonsense. But they were pretty lenient because they deal with this stuff all the time. Case 15. A few weeks ago, a friend of mine, a super nice guy who'd never had issues, had been with the same girlfriend for about 5 years. He had a tough day at work, came home and found her with another man. Their 3 kids and the other guy's 3 kids were in the house. The yelling started. My friend tried to elbow the guy in the face and the girlfriend got in the middle. When he turned to apologize, the other guy's son ran to stop the fight, and my friend accidentally knocked him down. He lost his balance and stepped on the kid's leg. My friend ran out the door because he wanted to end the awkward situation of pacing around the house and was furious about being cheated on. He went to his mom's and was taken to jail. He was charged with 2 counts of domestic violence, one against a minor, fleeing the scene, and obstruction of justice. I knew this guy as a contact for buying hormone supplements for the gym. From jail, he called his mom and asked her to go to a storage unit full of illegal supplements and get rid of everything before the girlfriend could report it. The only problem is that calls are monitored. The next day he was hit with an order for 32 felony charges. Case 16. My older sister was relentlessly teasing me when I was about 8. I stewed on it for about an hour and decided the best revenge would be to destroy her favorite blanket that our mom had handmade. One for her, one for me, cut from the same fabric. I grabbed her blanket and scissors and proceeded to shred it in front of her. She started laughing hysterically, which wasn't the reaction I expected. I looked at the remains of the blanket and saw my initials, realizing I'd mistakenly destroyed my own favorite blanket.